It's 7 minutes to 12 and my name's Sharon Hartley with you through until 2 o'clock this afternoon. Members of the National Union of Journalists, BBC local centres across England have begun a one-day strike. The action is over changes which will see an increase in shared programming with more resources going into local digital output. Paul Seigert is from the National Union of Journalists and he's been telling Graham Liver why this strike is happening.
We've got 900 journalists and presenters across England walking out today, fighting for the future of local radio. The BBC wants to end local radio, have regional radio going forward. We believe that's the wrong step. Our members feel strongly enough to take action today to try and force the BBC to reconsider. So at the moment we've got 39 local radio stations under the BBC's proposals after 2 o'clock weekdays. That would go down to just 21 regional programmes, and at weekends it's even worse. Saturday and Sunday breakfast, there'd be only 10 programmes. So lots of radio stations sharing, so the exact opposite of what BBC local radio should be.
But is it not the case that BBC local radio needs to evolve, needs to change? If things never moved on, we'd be recording this interview and I'd be using a reel-to-reel tape and using a razor blade to edit things.
They were the good old days, Graham, weren't they? I still remember those fondly, cutting your finger and losing the bit of tape you wanted because you put the bit you wanted in the bin. And things need to evolve. Local radio is over 50 years old and has evolved. But, it still has 5.7 million listeners every week. That's incredibly healthy. So, we shouldn't be killing off local radio, which is what we believe these moves will do. Because the USP of local radio, the only people doing local radio is the BBC, and once that becomes regional, it becomes less appealing to many of the listeners, and you start to kill it off. So yes, it needs to evolve, and of course it has evolved. So of course digital is the future. More and more people are using digital, the iPlayer, BBC Sounds, but we don't believe that the future of digital should come at the expense of BBC local radio.
That was Paul Seigert from the National Union of Journalists. Jason Horton is Director of Production for BBC local services across England and gave us his reaction to the strike.
We're really disappointed that it's come to this and that there is a strike today. We absolutely recognise the fact that everybody who's a member of the union has the right to strike, and we're really respectful of that. But I think we've got a really compelling plan about how we maintain and grow all of our local services across local radio, regional television news, and indeed our online services as well. And we spent time talking to both staff and the unions and to people outside of the BBC, explaining exactly what we're trying to achieve. Going forward, I've got the same budget for BBC local services, but the bottom line is we know that only about 13% of the population of England in any one week or month are listening to our BBC local radio services. And our aim is to get to 50% of all audiences across England. And to do that, if we're really going to achieve that, we need to invest in our digital services as well as our linear services.
Now, the BBC, by its own admission, needs to do more to reach working class people. Now, one service that is very good at that is local BBC radio, yet you're making it less local. Now, some people would say that just doesn't make sense.
And I would understand their point of view, but what I would be saying to them is this. Our BBC local radio stations will be on air from 6 in the morning till 1 the following morning, every single day of the week, as they are now. We will absolutely ensure that the programmes like yours, Graham, mid-morning that follows you, our daytime services and our sports services, those that get the largest audiences are staying local, as are our local news bulletins. The fact is that we know that later on in the day and at the weekends, we have fewer people listening to us. And so in those programmes, we are planning to share output across neighbouring stations. It will still be the best of our local radio presenters and producers. It will be the best of our local radio output. But we will have to share that over larger geographical areas.
Jason Horton there, the Director of Production for BBC local services across England. The midday news is next after Girls Aloud.
BBC BBC Sounds app, on your smart speaker and on your radio.
The sound of where we live is
Local BBC Radio.
At midday with the latest news, I'm Sharon Hartley. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, will start setting out this year's budget in the next hour.